Hello everyone, welcome back to the workshop. It's a fairly typical day today, blowing a gale, lashing down with rain, so yeah, very typical of the weather that we've been having. But we're in the workshop, nice and warm, nice and dry, and we're going to get on and do some work. It's crankshaft day today, so we're going to have a look at a Bantam 4-speed crankshaft. We'll assess it, we'll strip it down, and we'll make a start on getting it back together and seeing if we can get some more miles out of it. So I won't waffle on too much now because I'm fairly sure that I'll waffle on during the video. Standard Retromeccanica waffle. I hope that you enjoy it and you get something from it. So let's get on and do some work. Right, let's take a look at this crank. As you can see, it's in the V-blocks. We've got it on a couple of main bearings. These main bearings are the ones I keep with this setup, with this set of equipment. Just for doing this job. They slide onto the shaft really easily, nice and free, and they're in good condition. So yeah, good set of bearings for doing this task. And the reason why I've got it all set up like this, when we're going to break this crank down, is just to kind of get a baseline on the condition of the crank before we take it apart. And also, I like to mark them. I like to true them up. If they're wildly out, I'll true them up, mark it, and it gives me a guide when I'm putting it back together. I need to get around to making an assembly bolster, which will, make it so much quicker. But to be fair, it's a fairly quick process anyway. You just mark it, put it together using your marks as a guide, and you're usually within 4 or 5 thou, and then you do a little bit of truing and get to where you need to be. But I like to do this before I take them apart, just know what I'm dealing with. This crank is going to get a rod kit because we've got quite a lot of shake, which the rod is actually touching the inside surface of the flywheel at certain parts of the stroke, which is fairly common when they get worn, and there's a little bit of big end knock as well. So it's going to get a rod kit, and it's going to get a pair of shafts as well, because that's what the owner wants. They're probably recoverable, these. There's a bit of damage to the thread on the end of here, tiny bit of corrosion and tarnishing, but yeah, we're going to put new shafts in anyway, so by the by. I have cleaned up a little bit on the areas where the clocks are going to run, just so that we don't get jumping around with the needles, false readings. And you see the orientation that the crank is in the V-blocks. That's the way I always do it with 4 speeds. I think this one's a D10, judging by the riveted stuffing plates, but you never know what engine it's come out of, because people over the years have mixed and matched parts from different engines, but we'll call it a D10. That's probably what it's come out of. So yeah, that's what we're going to do. We're going to test it to start with and see where it is. If it's wildly out, we'll true it up, because I like to true them up before I break them apart. First of all, it gives you the confidence that the crank will true up. Second of all, you can mark the crank, and it serves as a guide when you're putting it back together. Normally get them within about 4 or 5 thou if you use your guide marks. So that's what I'm going to do, and yeah, let's get on with it. That was rather a waffling narrative. I do apologise, but I wanted to take you through the rationale of why I do this before I split them. So I've nulled out the clocks at the lowest points on the respective sides, and we'll have a look. It's just off top dead center at the moment. It's kind of found its own resting place, and you can see we've got a little bit of a reading here, a little bit of a reading there. So let's turn it, and I always turn them towards me because it's just easier. So we'll turn it towards me, and immediately I'm hoping that you can see the clocks. You can see that we've got polar opposites on the clock faces. One is rising as the other one is falling. They're not rising together. So that immediately tells us something. So let's do a bit more. So we're at 90 degrees there with the crank pin facing us, or pointing at us if you like. And we're on 0 here, and we're on about 2 thou here. Turn it round to 180 degrees with the crank pin facing down, and we're starting to fall off here and we're starting to climb here. Round a little bit more, back to 90 degrees with the crank pin facing away from us. And we're at shade over 2 thou here, and we're at 0 here. And then come back around, it'll find its resting place, which is about there, and we're back to where we started. So that's told us something quite interesting about the crank. I'm not going to mess around trying to true it up, because it's, you know, sort of 2 thou per shaft, which is, as far as I'm concerned, good enough to give us a guide to get it back together. I think once it's back together, we can probably do a little bit better than that. But yeah, it's good enough as a starting point. But what's it telling us? So when we put it, when we put the crank here at 90 degrees from top dead center, and it's pointing towards us, we've got high reading here and a low reading there. If we go the other way, it should be, as we expect, polar opposites, a high reading here and a low reading here. So that rules out any kind of spread or pinch, because they're not rising and falling together. If it was pinched at any sort of point around the circumference of the crank wheels, we'd expect to see 2 high readings. Even if we were getting a combination of skew and spread, at some point we'd expect to see both needles move pretty much at the same time in the same direction. But we're not getting that at all, so we can rule that out. And what we've got is we've got skew, and if we were to work on this now, we'd want to be working in this area here. So we'd with the crank pin towards us, and we've got high on the right hand side, we would want to hit the left hand crank wheel about here. Not go bananas, we just need to give it a nudge and see if we could bring that down. And we'd probably take a thou off both sides, I would think, by doing that, and bring them into about 2 thou overall, which is perfectly acceptable. That's what BSA, that's the limit for BSA, and probably how they left the factory, in all honesty. So yeah, we wouldn't have to do much to this crank to get it true, but the fact of the matter is, it has to come apart anyway, because we've got our issue with the big end. So that's the first bit of it. I just thought I'd take you through that, and I'll mark it up, and then we'll go over to the press and make some noise. Okay, we're over at the press, and I'm going to be, I think, hideously in the way for this next bit, but I'll do my best to let you see what's going on. Not a great deal of room over here, and it's quite dark as well. Might have to rig up an extra light. I'll try, see what we can do. Do my best. Anyway, I just thought I'd show you this. So this is the stripping tool that I use. This is a piece of 12mm steel plate, pocketed out to about 8mm, with this cut out as well in the middle here, so that we can get between the crank flywheels, basically isolate one from the other, and press out the pin without obviously, just transferring the force right through. We want to actually isolate each crank wheel from its neighbour so that we can press them apart. So that's what this tool's for. Some of you have probably seen it before. This came about, this particular tool. I had one that was more lightly constructed, and it served me quite well until Peter's B175 came along, and that thing had been in the wilderness for almost 50 years with water in the crankcase, and the crankshaft on that thing was just absolutely solid, and it just folded up my my other crank splitting tool like a paper napkin. So it was time to make a proper job of it. So that's what I've done here, and so far, touch wood, if we've got any anywhere. Touch wood, this thing's been man enough for the job. So yeah, I don't think we're going to have any problems using this. But I need to paint it, don't I, really? Make it, feel like it's staying. Make it feel part of the family. But I can get done as and when. But that's what we'll be using anyway. So let me just grab the crank, we'll get set up, and we'll make some noise, as I said. Right, I don't know if the lamp's making things better or worse, but we'll give it a go. I've got the pushing mandrel, which I made specifically for this job. It's in there, we'll just get it nicely lined up. Move things around a little bit. Reasonably lined up. Do us about there, and we'll give it a go. Got to keep an eye on things, because sometimes when you start to put the pressure on, things move a little bit. So you don't want to be actually slightly adjusting. You don't want to be trying to drag the stuffing plate through with you. So it's just a matter of just testing and adjusting until you get a good position. More like it, I think. We'll go with that anyway. Okay. A little bit of pressure. I just normally give it a bit of a jerk just to create a bit of a spike, and that normally pops them. Yeah, that's one. It wasn't a particularly tight crank, but not the slackest one I've ever done. Sometimes they properly go bang. There we go. Take that out of the way. Bit of a juggling act. Take that one out of the way. Incidentally, the one I was just telling you about, Peter's B175, probably the best one we've had in here for going bang. It really did go with a crack when it went. But it'd never been apart, that crank. It'd never been apart from the factory, so it was as tight as a tiger. Right, I'll lift this out of here, take it all over to the bench. Oh, there's needle rollers going everywhere. I was trying to avoid that. But take it all over to the bench, and then we'll come back to the press and pop the rest of the pin out. Right, here we go again. Then we're going to drop the pin out the other crankshaft half. See if we can get a bit more of a pop out of this one. Disappointing. It's quite tight though. Might pop on its way out. There we go. Right, cleanup and inspection time. So we need to go back to the bench. Right, here we are back at the bench. The weather is not very nice outside. I'm glad we're in the workshop and not working in the garden. Windy and rainy and just very typical typical of the weather we've been having recently, but there we go. We're in here, we've got the heating on, so we're doing all right. And we're having a look at our newly liberated Bantam flywheels, and looking at the wear pattern, which is quite typical. We've got some scoring on this side. This is the mag side, and yeah, a bit of scoring. I can't feel anything, any sort of pronounced steps or anything like that. But if we run the scriber across, I don't know if the microphone's picking that up, but you can hear that there are some scores in there. It's like playing a zither. But not terrible. I mean, I've seen a lot worse. So, well, we're about to see a lot worse. Because contrast that with the primary side. We've got this nice little trench dug in here, which I would estimate to be about 0.5 millimetre. It might be more. And it's been munching its way into the end of the shaft as well there, which sits flush with the bearing surface and is recessed there from the face of the flywheel. If we grab the connecting rod, again, this is quite typical wear, really. It's quite bad. This is quite a bad one, but I say not uncommon. Grab the connecting rod, the old one, and you can see it's got these friction reliefs ground in around the circumference of the bearing surface. You can see that they're, quite wide, 8 millimeters or something like that in length. And if I just flip the rod over, it becomes fairly obvious where that's been running. And you can see that they're all but, they're down to about 4 millimeters in places. Partially worn away. And that's obviously been running in there. And listen to that. It literally snaps into place like it's an assembly, like it's meant to do that. But it really isn't meant to do that. It's meant to run like that. Oh, you can't see, can you? Sorry. It's meant to be like that. Obviously, it wouldn't be doing that when it was running because it's restrained by the bearing and the pin. But, yeah, that's the kind of surface it's meant to be. It's certainly not meant to snap in like a snug-fitting part like that. So, in any other kind of sphere, really, this would be scrap, wouldn't it? Well, they both would be, really, with that level of scoring. Or certainly they would need some drastic repair work to be done to them. But obviously, we don't have BSA around the corner a BSA dealer that we can pop in and get a service exchange unit from, which is what they used to do. And this would have probably have ended up in the melt, in the scrap bin. And they'd have picked the best ones, probably given them a light regrind and rebuilt them and sent them back out. But obviously, they weren't expecting us to still be messing around with them 60 years later. But we are, aren't we? So we need to find a way of sorting that out. You'll notice that this area here is unworn, relatively unworn. And our repair rod runs on that unworn area. So we get, for free, an extra bite of the cherry just by using our repair rod. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to put a new pin in there, and we're going to use our repair rod, which completely avoids this Mariana Trench area here, and gets us back up and running. So these are very good rods for that, in that respect, really. I'm just going to measure that wear because I'm just a little bit curious about just how deep it is. I said 0.5 millimeter, didn't I? So let's give it a rough measurement. This is going to want to span more than one area, so we'll take it with a bit of a pinch of salt, but it'll give us a guide, won't it? Okay, let's see where we are. About 0.7 almost. So a bit more than I thought. That's in millimeters. 26.5 thou. Quite quite a substantial bit of wear. But as I say, our new rod will help us out, will get us out of jail. But increasingly, they're getting more worn. And this isn't a new idea, using this type of rod. So there's a few out there, and they're going to be wearing, and they're going to be getting to the point where we can't do anything with them. So to that end, I am working on a proper repair. If you were to take a more modern crankshaft apart, something like a Japanese crankshaft, you would find a sacrificial surface in here in the form of a thrust washer. This surface would be ground flat, and there would be a sacrificial washer in there with the rod running against the washer. So when you encounter wear, you can bin the rod, you can bin the washer, put new components in, and you've effectively got a factory fresh crankshaft. So that's the plan. That's what I'm working on. That's part of the reason why I've been revamping my workshop, to try and get my machines into a condition where I can crack on and do some of this experimental work that I want to do. So that's a work in progress. I think I've mentioned it before, but it's going to be, in the future when I've got my workshop where I need it to be and in the condition that I need it to be in. But we're going to have a go at that, because these things are just going to get, rarer and scarcer to find decent ones. And if we want to keep recovering these things and keep using them, we're going to have to come up with a repair with a bit more longevity in it, shall we say. But anyway, that's me waffling again, isn't it? What next? Well, we need to replace the shafts, as I mentioned earlier on in the video, and just turn them over. These are just pressed in. You can see that they've both got keyways. So on the primary side, we've got a keyway here that drives the primary sprocket, and then on the mag side, we've got this keyway here that holds the alternator rotor. I can't call it a mag side, but it's actually an alternator on these later bikes. The good news is the position of these keys. I mean, they always tend to be pointing towards the crank pin. I'm not entirely sure if that's a balance factor thing, but that's how I put them back anyway. But on the 3-speed machines in particular, you've got to get the mag side shaft in the right position, because the firing point depends upon it. So it's on the D1s and D3s, it's 27.5 degrees. So the keyway would be, if this was the mag side, the keyway would be over here somewhere. And then on the D7s, the later bikes, 3-speeders, it's 17.5, so somewhere here. So you have to use a protractor to get the keyway in the right position. Otherwise, if the bike's still using points, you won't be able to time it. Yeah, we don't have to worry too much about that on these, because there's no firing point or timing point dependent on the keyway. We'll just put them back where they are now. So we'll press the old ones out, and then we'll press the new ones in. How will we do that? Well, we've got some tooling that I've made. We've got it's basically an aluminium tube with a stainless steel face to it, which is quite hard wearing, because they do take quite a bit of force to go in. If you just use aluminium, it would just all splay out and go horrible. But yeah, this tool works really, really well. It's non-damaging. It protects the thread, obviously. You put the hydraulic force on here, and it presses it in to where it needs to be. Now, where does it need to be? Well, obviously we could press it all the way through, couldn't we? And hit the, we've got this hollow here. So if we kept pressing, we'd press it all the way through until it was flush with this. We don't want that. So what we use, same on here, look, what we use is a button. And I've machined up a number of buttons, because depending on the year of the bike, certainly on the 3-speeders, they change the crank widths, and the shafts come through a different amount. So you need a different button to make sure that you get it flush with where it needs to be. So if we just put that down on hard surface, push the shaft through. Once it hits the button, it'll be in the right place. And they're quite a good fit, these buttons. They need to be, because you don't want them falling out. And we'll just pop out like that with a punch, ready to be used again. So that's the next job, pressing out the old shafts and pressing in the new ones. And then we'll go for a rebuild on the crank with our new pin, which we'll have a look at now. Here's our new pin. Won't take it out of the bag, it's in a nice oily bag, nice and clean. Here's the old pin. You can see some bit of brindling on there from the skidding of the rollers. Yeah, not too bad. I've seen them worse, but we'll be replacing that with a new one. And as you can see, it's shouldered. So those of you that have had anything to do with the Japanese cranks that I mentioned earlier, they tend to be a plain pin. So when you're pressing your crank together, you've got to make sure that you get the pin through the crank to the right spacing. You've got to make sure that when you're pressing the two halves together, imagine that was all the way in and the con rod was on, we're pressing the other half on, you've got to make sure that you don't go too far. You make sure that you get your end flow on your rod properly. So that can be quite tricky. But we're a little bit spoiled with these cranks because we've got these shoulders, so we can't go too far. We press into the shoulder on that side, put the rod on, and then we press down onto the shoulder on that side. And that's pretty much where we have to be. So yeah, a lot less fiddling around with these old cranks. But as we've seen, yeah, they have some advantages and they have some disadvantages. The disadvantages are the fact that they've got no sacrificial surfaces and they tend to wear out. So that's where we are. They need a bit of a buff up to get the carbon off. I've been around and checked the rivets. I've checked the cracks around the rivet holes. I can't see anything visual, and none of the rivets appear to be loose. So we're going to leave the stuffing plates well alone, which is always wise counsel. If you don't have to remove them or mess with them, leave them alone. On the earlier cranks, you have to take them off because there's no holes here, so you can't press the cranks apart without removing the stuffing plates. But thankfully, BSA wised up on the later models, and they put these holes in to assist. But I'm not a big fan of stuffing plates. I'm not going to go into a rant now. If you follow the work, or if you're interested in the work of Mr. Carden, the East German gentleman that really made two-strokes go in the 60s and had all of his work stolen, you'll realise that yeah, these were just clutching at straws really to make two-strokes go better. He came up with the real deal, and I do plan to do some videos later on about two-stroke technology and how they developed. So watch out for those. We're going to have a bit of a chat about some of the theory and some of the ideas behind it. But I'm doing it again. I'm waffling. I'm going to leave the video here. There's going to be a part 2 when we finish off on this crank. It's Sunday afternoon, and I've got to get ready for the week ahead. So I'm going to publish what I've got, and I hope that you've enjoyed it. It's been informative, and that I haven't bored you to tears too much. I do apologise if I've waffled on too much, but yeah, there's a few sort of pertinent points that I wanted to get across. But yeah, we'll leave it here. I'll put together what I've got. It'll be quite a short video, and join me on part 2 if you want to see it progress. So I'll say, as I always do, thanks to all of my subscribers. Those of you who've been with me for a while, thanks for sticking around. Those of you who've recently joined, welcome. You're very welcome to the channel, and I hope that you are enjoying what we're doing. Plenty more to come. And to those of you who are watching and are not subscribed, it would help me out if you'd hit the button and ring the bell, and you'll get to see what we do straight away. And yeah, it doesn't cost you a shilling, and as I say, it does help the channel out. So yeah, I'd appreciate it. But mind how you go. It'll probably be can't get my words out, next week when we get back on this. I'm doing this crank. I'm working on Peter's bike as well. So there's quite a bit going on. And obviously the rigours of the day job taking me away from the fun stuff. That's just part and parcel of the deal, isn't it? Mind how you go, and I'll see you soon. Bye for now.